Hi, welcome to our frequently asked Fridays session, episode number 4. I think we're on, right, guys? What we'll
Yep.
do with this one is we'll start off with a quick introduction and what we've been doing this week, and then we'll go into our questions that we've been asked this week, and we'll go into that. So, for me, very quickly, we were at the South Coast user group on Tuesday night down in Southampton, in the UK. We did a talk on Azure Copilot and I did a demo, so we've recorded all of that as well. So we'll tidy that up and publish that on our YouTube channel shortly. And then in the next morning, bright and early, for a book launch from one of our friends at the Homegrown Club about being better at what you do, whether it's growing your business or just if you're a technical person, just how to be the best version of you, and some tips around that. So all about mindset and everything. So that was really good book launch. And then another networking meeting last night again at the Homegrown Club. And yeah, hand over to Adam. Do you want to tell us what you've been up to this week before we move on to our frequently asked Fridays? And then you and Connor can just say what you've been up to.
Yeah, definitely. So this week, a little bit of troubleshooting, a little bit of finishing off an automation project we were working on for a customer. And then we started a new project with one of our partners this week. So a bit of DevOps, a bit of automation, helping them deploy Bicep templates and get their infrastructure deployed, and sort of checking that it's all up to best practices and following everything that Microsoft recommends. So yeah, it's been a really interesting one. Connor, what have you been up to this week?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Yeah, kind of a bits and pieces one for me. Working on a bit of a design doc for a new client of ours, looking at putting a landing zone in place for them and kind of updating their Azure environment. And then, some troubleshooting here and there. And yes, some various bits, some studying as well for an upcoming exam. So yeah, little bits and pieces for me all over the place.
Brilliant. So yeah, thanks very much. It has been a busy and exciting week actually. You're starting new projects and stuff. So yeah, it's been good. Um, yeah, so let's start on the frequently asked Fridays questions. So Adam, I'll let you kick that off by asking your question to, I think you're asking to Con, but yeah, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this one came from a customer this week that we've been just doing some work with. So what can I do to troubleshoot Azure Web Apps and what tools are in the platform for that?
Yeah, so this came in from one of our new clients who were having a couple of issues with a few web apps they had, and just wanted to know, what can we do? How can we investigate this? How can we troubleshoot this? What can we find out? And there are a ton of fantastic tools built into the Azure portal to sort of help you investigate any issues you're having with your web apps. So it's as simple as going to your web app, looking at that diagnose and solve problems button, and suddenly you'll get like a full suite of options to sort of investigate various metrics like your CPU usage on them, memory usage, any crash reports, and you'll get details on those crashes as well. There's some nice proactive tools in there, for example. So there's a proactive tool for high CPU usage and for crash monitoring as well. And what these allow you to do is set up a storage account to send logs to. So the next time you have a crash or the next time you have high CPU usage, it'll dump a bunch of logs into a storage account for you to go and investigate, so you can see what's causing and what's behind those high CPU usages or potential crashes.
And that's
Um,
that's not done by default. Is that something you have to switch on, isn't it? And
that
configure,
is
right?
something you have to turn on. Yeah, you do have to
Yeah.
configure and set up a storage account to send those logs
Yeah.
to.
Okay.
Another big one there that's sort of in that wheelhouse of proactive tools is the what they call auto heal in Azure.
Okay.
And it's almost like setting up like functions sort of inbuilt into the Azure ecosystem of where you're setting various parameters and rules and conditions to meet. So, for example, high CPU usage could be one, or high memory usage. And when you reach a certain point, you'll then tell Azure to go take an action on that app. That can basically be set up to do whatever you want it to do. It could go and restart the app. It could make changes to the app. It could swap slots on the app. It can do
Right.
basically a big, huge,
Nice.
wide variety of things. But it can it can clean up some of that issues you may be having. That would normally require a person to go in and so maybe restart something or make a change. Kind of automate all of that to sort of make your life a bit easier.
Yeah, that's nice. And I think there's other things to switch on as well, wasn't there? We were looking at, it's like the diagnostics is not enabled by default. Application insights may or may not be. So it's those settings in there, and then what's configured inside application insights as well. So those kind of things are some good things that you should set up. And I always say to customers, make sure you've got a health check page as well. So to a page that actually goes and runs whatever your API is doing, does a connection test to the database, maybe even does a speed test and comes back and says whether it's successful and everything's working properly. So then we know we can probe that page, and then we'll know if that service has gone down or degraded, before the customers do anything.
It's definitely super useful to use that stuff. Because a lot of it is not set up by default, as you say. So super important to get that stuff set up.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, let's move to Adam. Was that everything on your side, Connor? Was there anything else? And we could go on for a whole day on this kind of stuff. We've got the custom scaling, all that, the different scaling routes, schedule, CPU's memory, those kind of things. Yeah. But maybe we'll leave that for another day. But Adam, what was your question then this week, and what kind of stuff have you been looking into?
Yeah, so I was asked by a customer today, actually, sort of about function apps and integrating those into on-premise networks. So they were specifically asking what is a hybrid connection, and how they can use that with their function apps and their web apps. So the hybrid connection is a really useful tool that comes with the apps in Azure, that allows you to connect to on-prem services. So maybe a SQL server, a data source, or applications you've got running on-prem. It allows you to securely connect to those resources without having to set up like a VPN connection or expanding your cloud networks down to on-prem with ExpressRoute and things like that. So it's a really quick and simple way of giving your apps access to those data sources. So yeah, it's just really useful for getting that stuff into your apps that might just be cloud only and things like that, really.
Is that like an agent that you'd install on a VM on-prem, or something that just talks outbound to the function, or there's no inbound connection, I'm guessing, with that one?
Yeah, so it's like you said, it's an agent that you can install on a server on-prem. Right. So it would need to be basically server 2012 R2 or newer, just because of it has to have WebSocket support on that server. So that's the requirement. You also need to be able legacy to. Anyway, Yeah. So I mean, even 2012 R2 is legacy now, like you said. So exactly. You should be running newer than that anyway. You should be absolutely fine. But
2019 is legacy, I would say.
Yeah, now we're seeing 2022 and 2025 coming out this year as well. So definitely. But yeah, you just install the agent on a server on-prem. You need to make sure that if you're using DNS to connect to those data sources or applications, that the machine that you install the agent on is able to resolve the host names of those data sources. And then you connect the agent up to Azure, either just by signing in with your account, or you can use a connection string that you can get from the Azure portal. And then that will connect to your Azure subscription, and then you'll be able to use that agent to create the hybrid connections from your function app or your web app. And then once that's all configured and you've got those deployed, that function app or web app will then be able to communicate to that data source that you've set up with the hybrid connection. So no need for VPNs, no need for managing on-prem firewalls, Azure firewalls, anything like that. You've just got that connection there and it will be available to that app. So really simple.
What if you had multiple function apps? Do you need multiple connection agents, or do you know?
So it depends whether they're connecting to different data sources and things like that, really. But you should be able to share them across apps and connect those to multiple apps. You shouldn't need to install multiple agents.
Okay, brilliant. I remember we talked about it this morning when I thought you was talking about something different, which is Vnet integration. So I got mixed up there. So you know, for those that are interested, the Vnet integration is where you inject your function or web app into an Azure Vnet, and then it can see resources inside that Vnet, whether it's a private endpoint for a SQL database, storage account, or even a resource or network device on-prem. If you've got a VPN, for example, you can inject a query into your function app and call that web service or VM or whatever it is from your function app, and it'll go through and access that on-prem data source. You can't access the function app that way, but that's a different thing. It's Vnet integration and would require VPN. So yeah, okay, there's lots of good ways of doing that. So cool. Okay, thanks, Adam.
No worries.
Yeah, Mitesh, so I think you had a question about sort of labs in Azure and learning to do. Can you explain a little bit about that, what the question was?
Yes, the question was kind of following on from last week's certification questions, or if you want to get into Azure infrastructure specifically, we talked about all the different certifications and the some of the material that's out there and some of the ways to work on that certification. So if you missed that, go and look back. I think it's episode 3 last week. So check that one out. And we also said in that talk, it's not just about getting your certifications, it's actually being able to understand what you're doing and actually able to do the tasks. The certification is kind of just a good stamp that you've got a good basic understanding. It really doesn't mean you can actually do the job. So the question from that was, okay, what kind of tasks can I do in my lab environment to prove to, let's say, a future employer that I actually know what I'm talking about? And the advice that I gave on that one is kind of something like the internal training that we do, is start by first of all creating, like just using the portal to start with, creating, say, a couple of networks, learn how the networks work, what is the structure of the network, learn how the IP addresses work and subnets, connect them together, put services inside them, whether it's a couple of VMs or whatever. Start with that. Build NSGs on top of them to put some firewall rules in place, then maybe look at Bastion, get that working, and then you could look towards these are all useful real world skills. So build an Azure Web Apps, kind of what you were talking about, Connor. Then maybe even look at the diagnostics options in there as well. But I would say start with building the web apps, understanding the different types and sizes and SKUs and options available for the web apps. Look at the scaling options. Set up a custom domain on a Azure Web App. How does that work? Set up an SSL certificate. How does that work? Bind that SSL certificate and then publish it over the internet securely. So block access to that web app and only allow access through an Azure front door, for example, or an application gateway. How do you get that end-to-end network traffic coming into your web app via a firewall, with the logging enabled, with the WAF features enabled, and in prevention mode even? And then how do you look at the logs for that, and how do you publish that web application securely? So that's so that gives you a good full spectrum of understanding DNS, SSL, firewalls. We could go into a lot of details there, but that understanding those basic things and being able to talk about them and answer questions about those things, you're not going to get that from an exam. An exam is not going to teach you how to do those kind of real world skills. It's kind of, in an exam level, it'll be like, what is a web app, right? Or you want to do a custom domain, which SKU do you use? Fine, but you're not, and kind of some of the steps on what are the tasks involved, but actually doing it is where you really learn it, and then explaining it back to someone else. Teaching someone is always a really good way to learn something. So yeah, I would recommend doing those, and I think we'd probably just write up something along those lines, and maybe even do a separate video just to help people who are trying to learn. These are some of the things that you should understand by the time you've set up your own domain. Understand the difference between the different types of DNS record. What is a CNAME? What is an A record? What's an SRV record? When to use each one? How to use it? Different types of certificates. That's when you'll really learn how to do this stuff. And a VPN as well, a really useful thing to learn and understand. Whether it's a VPN between two VNets or a VPN to an on-prem device is even better. We could go on, but start with that. And the last thing I would say, the last advice I gave on that one is, then once you understand all that, how it works, then start practicing doing it using infrastructure as code. So then start learning, okay, how do I now create those networks in that VPN tunnel, for example, or a web app in code? How do I do that in a bicep file? Great, I can do that now. It's all parameterized, etc. Brilliant. Now, how do I do that in DevOps? right? How do I create a repo? How do I create a service connection? How do I create a pipeline? You can get to that stage with the documentation and the labs available from Microsoft, but only once you've actually done it and actually understand it, that's when that's when you'll be able to get the jobs and keep the jobs and actually be able to add a lot of value. The certification on its own, without understanding the fundamentals, people struggle.
I think to add on to that as well, you mentioned about reinforcing that knowledge. But speaking of someone, obviously that can be difficult, is to find someone that you can talk to. However, something that I found worked for myself as well when I was first getting into this to help reinforce that learning was to say, like, write up a blog.
Exactly.
So obviously you can speak it out loud, kind of like almost like we're doing now. Sort of the more formal effort of going and writing up what you did and sort of almost documenting what you did, putting in screenshots and stuff. So creating documentation for your full work is really helpful and can really help reinforce that.
Absolutely, that's a really, really good point. And that's exactly how I started. So my own personal YouTube channel, I put some videos on there on how to set up an Azure load balancer and how to set up this and that, and some old SQL stuff as well. And it was mainly so I can refer back to it and put it in a way that I could learn it as I was doing it properly and solidify that knowledge, put it out there, share it with other people, and that really did help reinforce that knowledge. So yeah, and blogs are definitely a very good way of doing that.
Yeah, that also gives you a way to show off your work as well. To if you like, I say, if this is everything you're doing before you're getting a job, then you can prove to someone to say, here's my blog. Read about how I set up a VPN or a web app, or and they can see all that stuff. And
I think in that case, a video on YouTube, it really helps, because then you can see how does that person communicate that information. That'll be a lot easier for you to get noticed and land that job.
I think as well, when you're teaching people, it shows that you really understand that topic. You've really got to grips with it. You can explain it maybe in simpler terms. And I think that really translates to when you're in front of a client or a customer as well.
Absolutely.
It means you're going to be way more confident when you're in front of somebody, and you have to explain that simply to maybe a manager or project manager or something like that. And it just really helps you transfer those skills as well, and make sure that you can help people to understand what you're talking about.
Exactly. I think it also forces you to learn it as well. So if you're just studying just for the sake of it, or to do an exam, I've done this, I'm a bit stuck here, I'm gonna leave it, I'm not gonna bother. But then, I've got to document it, I've got to teach someone else it. It will force you to get past those hurdles. So I've had those hurdles before where the only chance I had to learn it, I've been putting it off. I had to do it on a project. Then you're spending 12, 13 hours a day. Then you have to figure it out, and then once you figure it out, then you documented it then. But it's easier to do that when you're not under pressure from a project, when you're learning. So just get through them hurdles and force yourself to learn it. So yeah, brilliant. So anything else from you guys on web apps, function apps, and all training certification?
No, not really.
No, not really.
Thanks everyone for watching. So that's episode 4 of FAF, Frequently Asked Fridays. And I hope you found that useful. Do check out the other video if you are training and interested in training certification. We talk about the specific training module certifications and where the content is free training and how to go about that kind of stuff. And then just put that together with the stuff, that advice that we've given today. And hopefully that will help you on your way with your Azure infrastructure journey. And thank you, Connor and Adam, and we'll see everyone next week. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.